It's 1997, and AJ Lopez is turning 5 years old. It's a day of celebration for the Lopez family, but what lies ahead for AJ is not all as joyful.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear AJ and Nicole. Happy birthday to you. Woo! 22 years old.
17 years later, AJ is turning 22, but this time the celebration is bittersweet. AJ has autism, and this year he will lose many of the government benefits he's enjoyed for his entire life. Most importantly, his right to attend public school. AJ is not the first or the only autistic adult to face this challenge. He is just part of a group that is often forgotten once they reach a certain milestone, the Catch-22. AJ's mother, Josie Ramos, is a psychiatrist in the Miami area. She sees autism in her line of work, but her own son's diagnosis still caught her off guard.
I had twins. I had a boy and a girl, and so very early on, by 6 months, I started noticing differences, especially with his lack of eye contact and things like that. And usually when you go to a pediatrician, they're always going to say things like, "Oh, he's a boy," and you know, boys have delays. So that was always the concept. You know, I've always heard that all my life, actually, especially delays in speaking and things like that. But it became pretty clear. And then you're kind of like, okay, now, you know, what do I do? So, but at that time, he was having all the classic symptoms, and he was also, not only was he was making sounds, but he wasn't clearly verbalizing. And he was very hyper. He was hard to, there's pictures that I laugh now, but we're trying to take a picture with him, like on a birthday, and I showed Nikki recently, Nicole, my daughter, that notice this picture. Notice that in one picture, he's there, we just put him in the chair, and within seconds, he has gone under the table. So the next picture, he's not there. So you see Nicole with him, and then you see Nicole without him.
Autism affects three key parts of the brain: the corpus callosum, which controls communication, the cerebellum, the body's center for coordination, and the amygdala, which regulates social behavior. Even something like saying a single word can be a challenge for an adult with autism.
The first time he said a clear word was in a little classroom at the learning experience, and they said, and they called me immediately because they couldn't believe it. He said it clearly, and it was part of the alphabet, the daily alphabet, and it was the word apple, right? So they told me, you have to come over here, you have to see this, because what they really surprised me that day, then not only did he was saying, you know, the alphabet, and I mean, believe me, he was nonverbal, you know, it's like you knew all this was inside of him, but it was like finally the connection of being able to say a word. What was amazing to me when he named the names of every little kid there, and I was just flabbergasted to know that he knew. I can't even cry now. That he knew the name of every little kid there. And that's how he is. He knows everybody's name. I mean, he knows everybody's names. Right, AJ?
Yeah.
Thomas and Marie Whitehurst are also parents of an autistic adult. Their son Thomas is just a few months older than AJ.
He was diagnosed when he was just under 2 years old. So we've been actively involved with Thomas and the autism world for 20 years. When he was younger, the types of difficulties that we had were taking him out to restaurants, even like to the movies and things. He would start getting, you know, very anxious and agitated. So we often would have to leave those, you know, wherever we were. So you never really knew how Thomas was going to.
It was unpredictable.
It was very unpredictable.
Like AJ, Thomas's biggest challenge is with speech.
Doesn't have much proactive speech. He has reactive speech, and there's times he has bursts. We just were visiting his school the other day, and they said, yeah, one day he just all of a sudden started chatting up a storm, you know, not reactively, but proactively. And it's like we don't see it very often, but he does have the ability. But speech is difficult for him also because he has something called apraxia, which makes it hard for him to combine certain letters. And and the other thing that's a challenge is it's hard to find out what he wants to do. Even if it's like, Thomas, do you want, vanilla ice cream or chocolate chip cookie? And he won't. We know there's something he wants, but until you actually start giving him the wrong one, he won't say a word. He won't make the selection himself. So, but we can work around because we kind of know what he wants. But
Right.
40 years from now, we don't know if there'll be somebody around that'll be able to predict his needs and wants and everything.
Thomas and AJ are part of the largest generation of autistic adults in history, and that number continues to grow. In 2000, 1 in 1,000 children were diagnosed with autism. Today, that number is closer to 1 in 68. Within the next 10 years, 500,000 children with autism will become adults.
You don't want them at home till you drop dead,
Right.
and then all of a sudden the kid's in this house and they're at 45 years old, they've got to make a transition. So we need to start the transition as quickly as possible.
Right.
And we're not here anymore because his disability has no restriction on life expectancy. He could live to 100, and who's going to be around then?
These families are only a few out of the millions affected by this disorder. Autism is the fastest growing serious developmental disability in the United States. At least 1.5 million Americans are currently affected by autism. That's triple the population of the state of Wyoming. The United States federal government established a program known as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, otherwise known as IDEA, which requires schools to provide programs for eligible students with disabilities up until the age of 22.
But at 22, everything stops, and that's the scary part, because then, you really have limited options, very, very limited options.
About him turning now 22. Yeah, it's major because now I feel actually how I felt when he was 22 months and almost 3, and I was looking for a place for him, and I feel like I'm back to that same place, like now what?
It's a question that every parent of an autistic adult must ask. At 22, AJ can no longer stay in the Miami-Dade public school system. Now, Ramos has to make a tough decision: pay tens of thousands of dollars a year for private education, or put AJ on a wait list for federally subsidized programs, a wait list he may never get off. Michelle Rubin's son Scott spent 12 years on one of these wait lists hoping for a Medicaid waiver. The wait list Scott was on has since been closed due to budget cuts, leaving thousands of Floridians without access to services.
Well, the legislature has slowly been releasing more funds as the economy in Florida has improved, that the backlog of people is so long that it's going to be, some people will probably never get it.
So Rubin decided to take matters into her own hands. In 2011, she founded Autism After 21, an organization that focuses on transitioning autistic adults into the workforce.
Autism After 21 was founded about 3 years ago, and it really was born out of my desperation that Scott was getting older, and I started looking around what was going to happen when he left the school system, and I really realized that there wasn't going to be a lot for him to do, and that he was going to lose most of the supports that he had been getting during all his years in school. So at the urging of some friends, who I think quite frankly got sick of me complaining about this, said, why don't you just do something? So I said, all right, if you gals will help me, then we're going to do it.
Rubin's organization seeks out businesses in the community to provide job training for autistic adults like Scott, free of charge. In some cases, the training periods can lead to permanent employment. Other organizations have decided to handle the job training themselves. Easter Seals is a school that educates special needs children from birth until age 22. The high school curriculum offers a culinary program that teaches skills to make their graduates employable as chef aides. Thomas Whitehurst was one of the participants.
Probably where I think he learned the most practical skills was in this culinary program, because that was definitely, it was geared to that specific activity. And so the whole curriculum revolved around, the supports that you would need. So the language arts was a lot about being able to read recipes. the math was about being able to take the measurements and, it's like a recipe that was for 6 people. They would have to do the math to figure out how to serve 60 people or, whatever. So they would actually, so a lot of what they were working was the 1.5 cups, times 6 or 10, and so it was very practical in that sense. And then they came out with a certificate, which is, a wonderful thing because it's not just a special ed certificate. This is a certificate that says, Thomas can be a chef aide. And frankly, that's now we just have to find him a job, but having that type of certification is a wonderful thing. I think that program was very, very helpful.
Yeah.
The goal of these job training programs is to equip autistic adults with the skills to land a job. Rising Tide Car Wash is one of the businesses hiring. Tom DeErie founded the small car wash in Parkland, Florida about a year ago with the goal of employing autistic adults like his 23-year-old brother Andrew. DeErie says he was disappointed by the lack of opportunities for his younger brother, so he decided to do something about it.
We did a lot of research around why there's so much unemployment among people with autism, and it turns out that there's about 80 to 90% unemployment among this group. So we did some deep dives doing research around what were the root causes of that. And what we essentially found was that there's two key reasons. One is that we as a society really view autism as a disability that requires sympathy instead of a really potentially valuable diversity and maybe even a potentially a competitive advantage for business. And the second is that there's no strategic reason across the business community as to why a business would step kind of outside of their comfort zone and hire someone with this diversity. And so what we wanted to be able to do is not only show and really educate communities around how capable people with autism are, but also create a really clear business case as to why a company should go and try to employ people with autism.
In just over 18 months since Rising Tide opened its doors, the small business has taken off.
We have folks come in from all the time asking to hand out flyers to their friends and their family. I have a son with autism, or my girlfriend has a son with autism, or something like that. Like, what can I do to help? And that kind of, the way that they've embraced this has really helped drive the business. We've got a really loyal customer base, and I mean, if you talk to our customers, most of them still come because it's a really good quality service at a reasonable price. But there's a large contingent of customers that would never dream of going to another car wash because they really they identify with our mission.
For Andrew, Rising Tides has become a place to call home.
My job responsibilities are to roll up the vacuums whenever there's no cars and then clean the lobby. I like working here a lot.
Other autistic adults like Karin Jawitz have found jobs working alongside people without disabilities. At age 27, Eric still lives with his parents, but every day he takes public transportation to his job at the Lowe's Miami Beach Hotel, where he works as a pool attendant. Eric is the hotel's only autistic employee, but he doesn't let his disability stand in the way of his work.
I'm the only one, but I don't tell my coworkers that, because it's private. Yeah, I want them to be like, why are you here? Your disability. It's like, I don't have one. That's why I pretend I don't have it, Even if I was like in the dressing room changing, I don't tell them about it because I don't want people to get mad,
His mother, Karen, says she was initially unsure if employment was even the right option for her son.
The opportunity came up and the job coach had heard about a job fair at the Lowe's Hotel in Miami Beach, and we were like, what is he going to possibly do there, and how is he going to get there? And we said, but just go ahead and take him, because it's like, for us, it was like an outing for him for the day, gave him something to do, and he went and interviewed, and next day I got a call back for a second interview. Went to the call back, and they hired him. And that was 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago. And he's been Employee of the Month, and he's won all awards, and he's happy there. He loves his job. He's a great employee, and they're really happy with him.
Like, helping people out, like also on guest times, give me tips, which I don't expect, because I don't think about it. Just think about their personalities, really. Sometimes guess, sometimes it could be handshakes too. Like I'm Eric, and you give like whoever their name is, which I still kind of care, because they're nice. I even get guest comments, sometimes, like after they get out from the email usually, right? Or you get email back from the motel, they make a few guest comments about me,
But while employment may work well for Eric, having a job just isn't an option for many lower functioning adults like AJ.
And the truth is, my son, unfortunately, does need supervision. I mean, he could, I cannot conceive of him just being totally all right, let's put him in this kitchen or cafeteria and just have somebody tell him, all right, go get this. And, he may be able to go get that thing, but he may then not know what to do with it after.
But luckily for AJ, there are still some options available. The University of Miami Center for Autism and Related Disabilities, commonly known as UM-CARD, is one of 7 university-based centers funded by the Florida legislature to help people with autism for the entirety of their lives. The center serves 8,300 families across South Florida. Dr. Michael Alessandri is the executive director.
So, I think the most important thing to always remember about autism is that it's a remarkably vast spectrum. So you have individuals on the autism spectrum who have normal intelligence, and then you have individuals on the autism spectrum who really do have intellectual disabilities. You also have individuals who are highly verbal, and then you have individuals who are essentially nonverbal. You have some individuals who are very socially motivated. They want to interact, but they don't quite know how. And then you have others who are much more aloof. And so you have every possible combination of ability and disability in the autism spectrum. And I think the most important thing to think about when you're thinking about creating a meaningful and viable life for someone after school is you have to think about meeting their needs on an individual basis. You have to think about creating for some individuals, it's going to be post-secondary education because they're on an educational track. For other individuals, it's about creating a work environment that can sustain them in terms of viable work for a lifetime. And in other cases, it's some combination. Maybe some of our adults are not really able to work full-time, but maybe they can volunteer part-time, maybe they can work part-time, and maybe they can do some education as well. So you just have to be very open-minded about trying to cobble together a life for someone that is based on their individual needs and not really try to predict or to fit everyone into the same kind of program. They really do need individualization. They're all very different, and their interests are different, their needs are different, and as a result, the services and systems that support them need to be different.
AJ is lucky. He's been receiving support and treatment from the CARD Center for most of his life. Many others in South Florida are not as fortunate.
We're actually able to reach, a significant number of people. Still far less than are out there. If you look at the prevalence rates for autism, which are pretty astounding, you would expect about 50,000 people in South Florida to have autism, and we're only reaching just over 8,000. So there are reasons why maybe some of those other people haven't found us yet, or maybe they don't know they have autism, or they have another diagnosis, or they're late in getting a diagnosis. There are many barriers to diagnosis and treatment, so it's possible that there are many more people that are out there that we still have to find.
Treatment for autism has made massive strides since AJ and Thomas were first born, but parents of autistic adults still have to face an ugly truth. While the disorder has major effects on the brain, autism has no impact on life expectancy, which means that most autistic adults will outlive their parents.
The thing that we don't want to talk, there's things that you never want to think about, but the reality is such as dying, and then what happens to, your child, right? Any parent knows that has to cross your mind. And especially when you have a disabled child, absolutely. And one of the things is that, of course, when you have, especially when you have other children too, you don't want to leave that responsibility completely to them.
For many parents, the solution to this problem will come in the form of adult residential communities.
We're in a situation where we could afford to set something up with like a group home or a home permanently and have someone living with Thomas, but it wouldn't expand his horizons and it wouldn't solve the rest of the community's problems. So we'd like to create a community, a larger community that sort of like a college campus setting almost, where the kids could live there and in a somewhat protected environment.
A concept of a village sort of like what you see in retirement villages, where you have different levels, of care and attention, from some that are maybe more independent, and then you have those that need somebody, constant supervision, like AJ, and yet have some where you have a center where there's actually going on, you know, some sort of like day treat, like what we do with elderly people with the day treatment centers, you know, that they get music therapy, they get somebody to do exercise, they get, you know, so something like that where, and then also including a residential, you know, kind of place for them. There are, you know, places that are in development right now that have, you know, that seem to be starting, looking at adults with autism and maybe starting like a day treatment centers and things like that, you know, but certainly it's not happening here.
There's not necessarily some person or somebody that's creating an obstacle. It's more a function of the system isn't really quite ready for these adults when they turn 22. So that's the challenge, is to be able to change that. And that's what we're trying to do in our own way.
We can't rely on the government for to address this issue, because it's simply too large. The processes that the government uses, vocational rehabilitation uses to find employment opportunities for people with autism, they're just not efficient enough to kind of take on that volume.
Without government-sponsored programs, the responsibility of helping these individuals transition into adulthood is left to everyday heroes like Tom DeErie.
You know, we're teaching our guys independent living skills, like how to take public transport, how to manage their money. We probably will at some point move into actual, you know, how do they live independently, pay rent and stuff like that, cook and clean and be safe living on their own without a parent or guardian. We need alternatives, and what our goal is, and what excites me about this is that if we can convince the business community that it's a competitive advantage to employ people with autism, we can actually solve this problem.
For others like AJ and Thomas, education will be the solution.
He loves words, he loves, you know, read. You like reading, right?
Yeah.
Do you like math?
Yeah.
No, you don't. Do you like count math?
Yeah.
Okay, no, he's not true. You're trying to impress everybody, AJ. Math he does not like, and but there's other things that he likes, and it's certainly and just learning, you know, to be together with others, you know, instead of being alone or isolated and staying at home and maybe bringing in tutors and stuff, which I guess I could always, you know, always do also, but it's not the same, you know, to be in a setting where he is involved with others. And
I would just say that it really does get better. It really, really does. And never give up on your child. That's the most important thing, is that you can make such a difference in your child's life. And just to stay informed, to stay on top of what's going on in the world of autism. So education is really important.
It's like a daily Rubik's Cube that you're trying to figure out, and everyone is different.
We often think of autism as a disability, a setback in development, or a cause for sympathy. But we fail to realize the unique advantages and the variety of talents that come with autism. From AJ Lopez to Thomas Whitehurst, from Andrew DeErie to Eric Jawitz, each autistic adult is like a puzzle piece, unique in their curves and edges. The pieces may look different from what we're used to, but without them, the puzzle is incomplete. The challenges that these autistic adults will face are great, and the changes they're hoping for in government and public perception will be gradual. But despite all of the adversity that comes with autism, their families still consider themselves lucky.
I heard a story one time I think describes it well. It was about a couple had been saving up for a couple of years and planning a trip to London. And they bought guidebooks and everything else, and they were saving their money, and they're going to go a really nice trip to London. So they're flying over on the red eye, and right before they land, the pilot says, "We're not going to be able to land in London because there's bad weather, so we're going to have to go to Paris. But maybe you can catch a flight later." So they spent the whole day at the airport but the airports were closed, and they were stuck in Paris. And they were really disappointed because they've been planning for 2 years this trip, and they had everything, they had their guidebooks, they had the whole thing mapped out. And they woke up the second day and they said, "Wait a second, we're in Paris." And by the end of the trip, they're like, "Why'd we ever want to go to London?" So that's how it is with Thomas.
Yeah,
He's our Paris.